applicable to all what you have been hearing. It bridges the gap between the law and commerce. Whatever somebody in health science is talking about, has to market it. And that's where commerce comes in. And there are laws that's also guiding marketing it. So, and then we have three powerful presenters that will be anchoring this section. And then they will let us see what is trade liberalization and state capitalism. And that will be presented by Mr. C.I. Onwachukwu. And the next presentation, who is also going to the area of health, will be presented by Mr. Taiwo. He's talking about appointment scheduling for physician and nurse practitioners. Then the third one is going to be taken by our able lawyer, Mr. Tolu Lokbe, talking about R&D, innovation and patent law, balancing right and obligation. Each presenter will have about 7 minutes. Please, let's be strictly 7 minutes, and then 3 minutes for question and answer. And I believe at the end of these three presentations, I know you will have been garnished with theoretical and practical knowledge in terms of law and commerce, how to deal with our daily activities. All right, so I hand over to Mr. Onwachukwu to take us in the first presentation. Mr. Onwachukwu, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, go ahead. We can see your screen.
Okay. So we're investigating how trade liberalization affects the welfare of workers in both state-owned enterprises and privately owned enterprises. So because of less time, I'll just shorten everything. Okay, so as I pointed out in the abstract, which everybody has, the major limitation of existing studies out there is that they always focus on how trade affects the wage of workers in a given industry or many industries. But the thing is, a worker has to bargain with a firm in order to determine what the wage is going to be. So that means if you're focusing on industry wage, you're simply neglecting what determines wage at the firm level. So that's why in this study, we're focusing on two kinds of firms: state-owned firms and privately owned firms. So what we're doing is we're studying how trade liberalization, which we proceed with tariff, affects the wage of workers in state-owned and privately owned enterprises. Okay, but for us to carry out this analysis, we need a source of exogenous variation. And that exogenous variation comes from Russia's joining the World Trade Organization. So in 2012, Russia joined the World Trade Organization. So this first plot, A, shows the average tariff for all the industries in Russia. So you notice that the common trend is that tariff continued to decline, even after they joined WTO in 2012. Then also, this decline in tariff is actually heterogeneous when you look at different industries. So to show that it is heterogeneous, this is a plot showing the tariff of different industries in 2001 and the reduction in tariff across all the years. And the years is from 2004 to 2018. So you notice that there's a positive relationship, meaning that industries with a higher tariff in 2011 actually experienced higher reduction after Russia joined the World Trade Organization. So it is this exogenous variation that helped us to overcome the identification problem in our study. Okay, so our data set is from the Russian Longitudinal Monitoring Survey, and it covers 1994 to 2018. But because people started reporting their industry of employment in 2004, we had to drop all the years before that. So we focused on 2004 to 2008. And they covers a balanced panel of more than 18,000 individuals. So, and the survey provides us with industry level information, firm level, and individual level information. Okay, so this is the model that we want to estimate, is a simple difference model. So the dependent variable here is log wage, hourly wage. And POE is a dummy variable that takes one if an individual is employed in a privately owned enterprises. And it takes 0 if the individual is employed in a state-owned enterprise. So the change in T here is a proxy for trade liberalization, which is change in tariff. Then the X here represents a bunch of control variables, from individual variables such as age, experience, to firm level control such as number of workers in a firm and other variables. Then we also control for individual fixed effect and year fixed effect. Okay, so basically the coefficient we're interested in here is this beta. So it will be telling us the difference in wage between workers in state-owned enterprises and those in privately owned enterprises. So if the coefficient turns out to be positive, it means that trade liberalization made workers in the POE to earn more than those in the SOE. But if it is negative, it means that those in the POE earns less. Then this is also an alternative specification whereby instead of using change in tariff, we just use a dummy variable that takes 1 from the year Russia joined the World Trade Organization. Okay, then in addition to this, we also explore how tariff reduction affects job loss. So to create a variable for job loss, we just add up the number of years that a worker is unemployed for the whole sample period. All right, so this is where I explain some of the variables. So tariff is tariff in the previous year minus tariff in the current year. So if this number is increasing, it means that there is more trade liberalization. Then post-12 is a dummy that takes 1 from 2012 and above. And like I said before, X is control variables. Okay, so this is our first result. So we're just focusing on the coefficient of the interaction. So that's why I'm just reporting only that. But behind this result, we controlled for individual variables, firm variables, fixed effects. So from the first column, you see that the coefficient there is negative and is highly significant. So it means that trade liberalization made workers in the POE to earn less than those in the SOE.
You have 1 more minute, Mr. Nwachukwu.
All right. Okay, so we carried a lot of alternative specifications, but we ended up still getting these negative results. Then in the next one, we checked how this effect varied for workers of different scales. So we classified workers into high scale, low scale, and medium scale. And in each case, we're always getting that negative result, meaning that those in the POE are earning less. Then for the case where the dependent variable is job loss, we see that the coefficient is positive. Okay, so our main mechanism is that workers in POEs are actually getting less probability of getting promoted. So they are promoted less. Then also, those in POEs have a high probability of leaving the market, which is why they are losing their jobs. Also, privately owned firms are not protected from foreign competition. So when there is stiff competition from outside firms, they tend to close down. And when they close, those employed in those firms lose their jobs. And then also the POEs, they lack access to credits, unlike the SOEs that get credits from the states. So in conclusion, being employed in SOE could help mitigate the negative impact of trade on workers' welfare. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your presentation. While we encourage every participant to please give Mr. Nwachukwu very valid comments, please let's access the link. Let's use the link to pass our comments. And then again, we are welcoming questions. if you have any question you want to ask right now, live question, please raise up your hand. And then while we wait for anybody with question, I want to quickly ask Mr. Nwachukwu. I know from your mechanism you point out on the issue of foreign interference. I just want to ask, what are the mechanisms? How did you measure the influence of foreign intervention? I know the research is focused on Russia, but you know there has been a severe trade war between US, China, and several other countries, sanctions here and there, even including Australia recently. So my question is, how did you measure this foreign unstable political influence to come about to your conclusion?
Yeah, actually, we do not observe any data about that. But the main mechanism we're able to test is promotion, because there's the participants were asked if they've been promoted throughout the year of this survey. So we just regress this on the main variable of interest. So, and we got a negative estimate showing that those in the POE have lesser probability of getting promoted. But coming to what you asked, there's a study, a FEM level study, full FEM level study that actually tested it. So how they tested it is that they first of all regress the access to credit. So they found that for POEs, they tend to get less access to credit because they don't have the backup of the states or the government. And then also the government tends to protect the state-owned enterprises from competition. So that's why they are not actually taxed much. So
thank you so much. Because of our time, because we don't really want to keep our audience waiting, I think I've already gotten the answer, and I would, if you can consider that in furthering your research, it would be good. FEM level analysis is very important. There will be some differences that will happen between the POEs and the SOEs. And I think with what is going around in the world, assessing FEM level analysis will be important so that in case of any eventuality or variation. I want to say thank you for your presentation. It's a wonderful presentation. The analysis are, how do I say it, very enlightening. I want to say thank you. So right now we move to our second presenter, which is Mr. Taiwo. Mr. Taiwo will be talking to us on appointment scheduling for physician and nurse practitioners providers in outpatient clinic. Mr. Taiwo, over to you. 7 minutes.
Thank you very much for having me here. And today I'll be presenting on the topic appointment scheduling for physician and nurse practitioner providers in outpatient clinic. This is my outline, and I just jump to the introduction. The motivation to this problem. Today, we see that increasing demand for healthcare services has led to the shortage of physicians. And importantly, this COVID-19 pandemic has actually made the whole thing worse. As before now, the Association of American Medical Colleges reported in 2019 that the US needed an estimated 95,000 additional physicians as of April 2019. Now, this is the problem, this is the challenge. How do we match the demand and the supply of physicians? So the way forward is to harness the nurse practitioner supply in the system. There are a lot of nurse practitioners in the system that are not that are used as ad hoc or staff in some way. And it happened interestingly that just yesterday there is a discussion I read on SEMP in this regard. Hong Kong Public Hospital waiting time school base slashed after pilot scheme, giving nurses more power to make decision is successful. Before now, nurses are not allowed to handle independently issues or relating to patient health. But now there have been improvement in the policy because of the shortage of the physician. We have to harness this supply. So what is the benefit for the outpatient clinic? The NPs can serve as independent providers. They can offer comparable quality of care to patients. Utilizing NPs may increase patients' access to care. But what are the challenges? Patients' perception of quality difference leads to their reluctance to be served by NP. We feel that the nurses are not well qualified as much as the doctors, and so they offer just a minimal quality of care to patients. But that is not actually true in all cases. Another challenge is that patients scheduled for appointment may not show up for their appointment, and this will lead to underutilization. Then the grand challenge is now that we are inviting the nurse practitioners to join the physician capacity, how should we determine the appointment scheduling decision for this kind of system? So this is the focus of this research, how to design appointment scheduling for this kind of system. And so this is the model we have to decide. Here is like the schedule for a day, starting from 10 a.m. in the morning to 12 noon, for instance. And we have to decide how patients arrive at each appointment at the beginning of each time slot like this, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And in this system, we have, say, for instance, you have 2 nurses and 1 doctor. A patient can be served by a doctor or a nurse if the doctor is busy in a slot. A patient can choose not to allow a nurse attend to him or her in a slot, so he or she will have to wait until the doctor is free. So the challenge for the schedule officer, the system for the scheduling appointment goes like this. The patient have to call the officer at least a day ahead to book appointment to see the doctor. A patient scheduled for appointment may not show up. They may not show up. And so these are some of the trade-offs that we have to consider. Like, how do we balance this? If we schedule too much patient, there may be a longer waiting in the system. If we schedule too less, there may be underutilization. So this is the model we want to determine how many patients should arrive at each appointment time slot. And the goal is to minimize the patient waiting time, the doctor and the nurse idleness, and the doctor's overtime, because overtime is more costly for the provider. So to address this problem, we propose this optimization model, and I wouldn't take time to go through this, the detail of this optimization model, because this is this is integer programming problem. It's quite challenging to solve. We propose a heuristic called the cutoff variable neighborhood algorithm to solve this problem. And straight to the numerical results, we find the following insight. When we have the nurse practitioners deployed in the system as independent providers, the common practice is to have the nurse attend to you, maybe take your diagnosis and then transfer you to the hospital, to the doctor. But in this case, we are advocating that we should have nurse start with you and end all procedure with you. So when NPs are deployed, what do we find in this kind of problem, in this our model? We find that physician utilization level will increase. And when physician utilization level increase, that is equivalently saying that the revenue for the clinic is going to increase. Also, patient access to care is going to increase, conditional on whether patient's willingness to be served by NP is substantial. So if the patients are not really willing, like they just so reluctant that sometimes you don't even get to see 1 or 2 patients that are ready to see the nurse, then that is not sensible. It's just like the nurse in the system is useless. Also, we found that the more NPs are deployed, the more likely patient waiting time is going to increase. The fact that we have nurses available does not mean that we can just bombard the system with a lot of nurses. This doesn't make sense. Further, we find in addition that the model allows for analysis, allows for
You have 1
analysis of the
minute
optimal.
left, Mr. Taiwo.
Okay, thank you. So we can, with the model or plan, what is the optimal capacity for a system? So in conclusion, we find that the deployment of NP as independent providers leads to increased patient access and maximum utilization of physician capacity. However, the decision maker must be careful to consider the uncertainty in the patient's willingness to see NPs. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you so much. I encourage us to ask questions from the audience.
I have a question, please.
Okay, go ahead with your question,
thank you very much, brother, for this interesting presentation. Yeah, I do know that in the sociology of medicine, of which I'm also interested, I know the argument between the nurses and the doctors is an ongoing one. Yeah, but I would just like to know, my question will not come from the empirical angle. I would like to look at it theoretically.
Okay.
First, because of the shortage in medical personnel, especially in the number of doctors, right? The doctor-patient ratio. So you propose that the nurses should be added. Well, you've shown us example in Hong Kong, but why only nurses? Why not other medical professionals? One, that's the first question, and I think it's a theoretical one because the way they are trained differ. So instead of looking at the empirical usage of the nurses, why not the theoretical usage? Why not go back to the school where they are trained? Because nurse therapy is different from what doctors do. Nurses are basically, by training, they are therapists. They are to give their own therapy. Now, in diagnosing diseases or conditions, which basically the doctors do, and the pharmacologists, trying to prescribe.
Maybe just go straight to your question. Just ask your question.
Okay, my question is this. Why not look at the theoretical implication of, or the theoretical possibility of including nurses, going back to how they are trained, to what they are trained for, and
all right, thank you, Mr. Sunday. Your response, sir.
Professionals.
Okay, so thank you for your question. So why nurses and not other health professionals? So here, the word nurse practitioners doesn't necessarily mean nurse. So there is a standard definition for the word nurse practitioner. They have actually obtained advanced or educational level in some area of specialty as well. And the point here we should note that is that the background, the academic background is technically not or something that we should argue about, but experience. So a nurse who has 10 years of experience can be better off than a newly graduated physician. So this is the argument, and this is what the experts also agree upon, that experience is actually what is important. Some of these people have the experience more than some newly graduated physicians. So that's why we think about this.
All right, let's quickly welcome one more question before we go. Any other question on this? Okay, if there is none, thank you so much, Mr. Taiwo, for that wonderful.
I think I have a question in the chat.
Okay. I think, okay, this is from the same person from the chat.
From the same person, but he made a mistake.
From the same person, but he has already made it verbal.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from the same person. All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. All right, now we are going to the third presentation for this section, and that will be looking at R&D, innovation and patent law, balancing rights and obligation. So, and then this will be taken by Barrister Tolu Lokpe. All right, Barrister, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I think I've been disabled from sharing my screen. Can you look into that? Okay, oh, very good. Okay. All right, thank you so much for having me. So very quickly, I'm going to be discussing this topic, R&D, innovation and patent law, balancing rights and obligations. So it's, by way of introduction, it's important for us to note that intellectual property is all around us today, and we live in a 21st century technologically driven world. So the strength of any nation is determined by the strength of its scientific and technological innovation. And it's also important for us to note that the legal instrument via which intellectual property rights are protected revolves around copyrights, patents, utility models, designs, trademarks, and all. So within the purview of this paper, I'm going to be focusing on patents. For the sake of those who may not really be familiar with this term, patent basically revolves around the rights granted to inventors to have exclusive ownership of their patented products or processes for a period of not less than 20 years in exchange for full disclosure of the invention. So basically, it's more like if you have an invention, you disclose your invention, and then the government holds it in trust, and then you enjoy monopoly rights over the invention for a period of 20 years or more. So the theoretical justification for patent rights is actually, it's like if inventors are incentivized, then the society is going to be better for it, then knowledge is going to be available, then technology is going to be well diffused, and then it's going to leave, it's going to be in the overriding public interest to have patent law in force. So patent law is governed by, basically there are quite a number of laws, the Paris Convention and all, but the TRIPS agreement of the World Trade Organization is a very central agreement that governs patent law. And Article 27 of TRIPS agreement says that all nations of the world, of course about 190 nations who are members of WTO, must grant patent rights in all fields of technology. Of course, this includes pharmaceuticals. So the issue with pharmaceutical patents is this. We need to strike the balance between economic benefits and the cost of human lives. Because when you grant pharmaceutical patents, most times it pegs the prices of drugs far beyond the reach of the most vulnerable population. You know, I have said it earlier that patents grants monopoly pricing, monopoly manufacturing and production. So most times, because of the monopoly, generic manufacturers will not be able to drive the competition that's needed to bring down the prices of drugs. So that is the challenge with affordability and access. So quite a number of drugs for non-communicable diseases and communicable diseases are far beyond the reach of those who live in less developed countries. With even drugs for second-degree drugs for HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, type 2 diabetes, lung cancer, prostate cancer. Of course, there are drugs for these ailments, but the more effective, innovative drugs are actually far beyond the reach of the poor. And that is a major challenge in developing countries because of course, this conundrum of patents, of pharmaceutical patents. So the central question is just to look into the jurisprudential justification. I mean, the theoretical justification for patents law. Is it really right to actually patent pharmaceuticals? And when I say pharmaceuticals, I'm talking about medicines, diagnostic kits, and all, particularly when this comes at the cost of human lives. Of course, the argument from the other side is, oh, big pharmaceutical companies invest billions of US dollars in research and development to produce these drugs. The cost of clinical trials, first clinical trials, second clinical trials, it involves a lot of funds. And it's actually patent law that grants them the protection window within which they can recoup their investment. So that is their own justification for it. But on the other hand, people are actually dying. Those who need access to these drugs don't have access to these drugs. So can we really say that patenting life-saving drugs is theoretically justiciable? So this is the question. So looking at Africa as a continent now, it's been a very challenging moment, of course. The access to medicine challenge is multifaceted, but patents, the international patent regime is um, one of the main factors responsible for the lack of access to essential medicines. And not only that, we have quite a number of neglected tropical diseases in Africa. Even Ebola was discovered in 1976, and up to now, we don't have any treatment or vaccine for Ebola because pharmaceutical companies don't really see the reason to invest in most of these neglected tropical diseases because, one, Africa lacks the purchasing power. People don't have enough money to purchase these drugs, and also African countries lack the economies of scale because the business of business is business. So pharmaceutical companies want to have patents so that they can recoup their investment and make money. But Africans don't have this money to purchase these drugs, and most of the diseases bedeviling them. It's actually of no interest to developing countries, to developed countries. So that is the major challenge in Africa. Research in investment in R&D is very, very low, and a number of other issues. So the major finding is just from this work is more of bringing to bear the need for um, African integration. You know, it's more like a country like Togo has a population of less than 2 million. This country cannot actually attract.
One more minute.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm wrapping up. So this country does not have the market size, does not have the purchasing power. So, but if Africa comes to, I mean, the continent comes together as one, then we can have the bargaining power. Then we can also have the market. We can have the economies of scale to bargain with big pharmaceutical companies and also build local manufacturing capacity that can serve the entire African continent as one. Basically, that's what I have to say. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, thank you so much for that insightful presentation, right on time. So I welcome questions from the audience. Questions? Okay, while we wait for maybe anybody, someone will still make his mind up to ask questions. This particular research is within the world context, actually focused on the World Trade Organization, and then looking at patents, and then and having the understanding that it is not all countries of the world that are part of the World Trade Organization. Do you think there is any, or do you consider that in this research that maybe there's any independent national relief that can be given for developing, countries to seek access to these pharmaceutical patent drugs? Maybe there could be some relaxation for such in developing country, or do you consider that while as a factors in why taking this research?
Yes, actually, there are quite a number of waivers and flexibilities in the TRIPS agreement, particularly for developing countries and least developed countries. One of it is compulsory license. Compulsory licensing is so if a particular country, a poor country in quotes, needs a particular patented drug, you can issue compulsory licensing. But this has not really been effective because it's business, and these big pharmaceutical companies don't even come to these poor countries to actually have patents in the first place. So 90% of drugs we use in Africa are actually imported from India and China. They are called generic drugs. So it's more of a dilemma. Of course, these flexibilities are there, but they are not really effective.
All right, thank you. Any question again? One more question. All right, we round up this section for Barrister. I want you to look maybe more on that aspect of this flexibility licensing, because of course we are talking of international, and there are some instability, and then for us to quickly, generalize, because we can't do without patents, and for us to quickly generalize that patenting is causing more damage than its benefits would be a very ambiguous claim. And then we should just try and also impute this factor of, because I know there are some flexibility in licensing. So you should make your argument from this angle of flexibility licensing. And if that is adequately considered, then we can now come to the conclusion that patent is actually doing more damage than its benefit. Thank you so much for that very insightful presentation. I want to say thank you to all the presenters for this section. It has been a wonderful presentation, and I know our audience has been able to know that they have opportunity to seek flexibility licensing, for some patent drugs. And I want to say thank you. So at this point, I hand over to the coordinator for the closing aspect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shoyinka, for the coordination and to all the presenters. I will like to call on the chairman, Dr. Akini. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, I want to appreciate everyone for the time. I understand it's not easy presenting a lot of work within 7 minutes, but I think it's a form of training for us as well. There's a competition in HKUST whereby you must present your whole 4-year PhD research within 3 minutes. It's a very powerful competition. So I think we should all try to see how we can consolidate most of our findings and make it presentable within a few minutes. So thank you very much for all the presenters. Thank you very much. Please, I also observed that we've not been using the link. Apart from giving comments, it's also very important to assess the presentation skills of all our presenters. So please try and endeavor to use the link. It's going to be available for the next 24 hours. So please, we need you to help us assess these presentations so we can actually give them a more comprehensive feedback. So once again, I want to appreciate everyone for joining the meeting. Thanks to all our audience and all our presenters, the reviewers, and all our chairs. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So over to Mr. Mujib.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it is indeed a bitter experience to come to the end of such a productive day. I'm sure everyone has enjoyed such a successful research forum for this year, being the one that has the highest number of contributors, as well as the one done online using this Zoom forum. And also, as today's theme is on innovation in arts, sciences, and technology, I hope by listening to these excellent presentations, I'm sure that we gain some experiences as regards interdisciplinary researches in fields different from ours. And I want to use this opportunity to thank all participants and all our alumni members who couldn't join us as well. And I also try to remind us to please help us to access the presenters using the links provided. It helps to give them feedback on what they have done so far. And also, I want to thank our guest presenters. First of all, Dr. Akintola Minde, who has joined us from Georgia in the US. It's indeed in the midnight over there, and he's taken his time to join us. I also thank Ms. Tura and Mr. Bamidele, who presented from Hong Kong Baptist University. Also, I'd like to thank all our 7 presenters, Mr. Blessing, Dr. Temitope, Mrs. Ijoma, Mrs. Kindness, Mr. Increase, Mr. Taiwo, and finally, Barrister Tolu. All our 11 reviewers and all our 4 session chairs, Mrs. Kindness, Miss Adenike, Mr. Iwe, and Dr. Wale. And also, I want to say that it is evident from the presentation and that you've all worked hard to make this successful. And I can boldly say that it's been a success. I also appreciate the whole of the Research Forum Committee, Dr. Damilola, Miss Kindness, and Mr. Blessing for a job well done. And I want to say that, in fact, Dr. Damilola has been working hard on uplifting this research forum for the past 3 years. In 2018, he was the only presenter, and he was part of the executive, the last executive of ANHSK. And also, I want to thank all members of the executive committee also, especially Dr. Timothy, Mrs. Mistura, Mr. Kenny, and Mr. Umar Mubarak. I'm delighted that you could all attend this year's research forum, and I hope that this forum has bridged some gaps for research interactions and collaboration and networking between our members. And we hope that through this knowledge sharing, that we can all be the drive of the change that Nigeria needs. And I want to also add that we will be presenting a soft copy of the certificate of presentation to the presenters, since we couldn't do it physically now. We hope that by the next meeting we can do this physically. Thank you all for staying by us through the time. We apologize for staying longer than we planned, and we hope to see you next time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mujib. During the research forum proceedings, we have our patron, Professor Marfa, who came online and has been with us for a number of minutes now. So I'd like to call on him for some word of advice. Professor Marfa.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?